The final verdict felt less like a victory and more like the quiet closing of a heavy steel door. My ex-wife, I suppose I had to get used to that term now, was sobbing, a raw, ugly sound that filled the sterile conference room. Her mother was right beside her, face a mask of disbelief and rage, her perfectly coiffed hair looking suddenly ridiculous. She stared at me, her eyes promising a kind of retribution she was utterly powerless to deliver. I met her gaze for a brief moment, felt nothing, then turned my attention back to my lawyer, Ben. He nodded once, a small affirmative gesture. The mediator gathered his papers. It was over. She had demanded the house, half my pension, and lifetime alimony for a child that wasn't mine. She was leaving with a court order to repay the $47,000 she had stolen from my deployment savings, and a restraining order preventing her from ever contacting me again. Did I feel vindicated? Maybe. But mostly I just felt tired. I was 32 years old, a staff sergeant in the Army, and I had just executed the most successful mission of my life. It was a mission to reclaim my own future. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Alex. Before all this, my life was built on a foundation of simple, solid principles. Duty, loyalty, and hard work. I enlisted right out of high school, not because I had no other options, but because I believed in the structure and the purpose it provided. The Army was my family, my career, and my identity. For 10 years, it had been the central pillar of my existence. Then I met Chloe. She was vibrant, funny, and seemed completely unimpressed by the uniform. I liked that. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office, and she talked about wanting a family, a house with a yard, a life that felt stable and normal. It was everything I thought I wanted, too. A place to come home to that was truly home. We married a year later at the local courthouse. It was a small affair. My parents had passed away years ago, and my only real family was my sister, Sarah, who lived 2 states away, and my unit. Chloe's family, on the other hand, was ever-present. Her mother, Diane, was a woman who appraised everyone she met with a quick, dismissive scan, calculating their worth and finding it wanting. She had never approved of me. A soldier's pay was, in her words, commendable but not comfortable still. Chloe had seemed to be on my side, defending me, assuring me that she loved me for who I was, not what I earned. I believed her. I was a fool, but a sincere one. We bought a small house on the outskirts of town. It was a fixer-upper, but it was ours. Or rather, it was mine. I had used the entirety of an inheritance my grandparents had left me for the down payment and had insisted the deed be in my name alone. A piece of practical advice from my father I never forgot. Always have one thing that is yours and yours alone. Chloe had pouted about it for a week, calling it unromantic and mistrustful, but I held firm. Eventually, she relented, and we spent the next 2 years making that house a home. I poured my sweat and my savings into it during every moment of leave. I learned plumbing from YouTube videos, laid hardwood floors with a buddy from my platoon, and built a deck in the backyard with my own 2 hands. It was my sanctuary, our sanctuary. Then came the deployment orders, a 9-month tour. It was my 3rd one, so I knew the drill. It was hard on a marriage, but we had a routine. We had video calls, emails, and a joint bank account where I deposited the bulk of my combat pay. I gave her power of attorney, trusting her to manage our finances, to pay the mortgage, to keep our life running while I was gone. I trusted her completely. That was my second mistake, far greater than the first. The first was just marrying her. The first few months of the deployment were routine. The connection was often spotty, but we made it work. Chloe would complain about being lonely, about how the dishwasher was making a funny noise, about how her friend Jessica just got a new convertible. I'd listen patiently, offering what solutions I could from 7,000 miles away. I sent her flowers. I increased the allotment to our joint account for repairs and emergencies. And I counted the days until I could come home. The inciting incident, the moment the world tilted on its axis, came 7 months into my tour. It was a grainy video call, the audio cutting in and out. Chloe was on the screen, her face puffy. She was crying. My first instinct was panic. I thought something had happened to her mother, or that the house had burned down. "Chloe? What is it? What's wrong?" I asked, my voice tight, She looked up, a shaky, tearful smile spreading across her face. Nothing's wrong, Alex. It's wonderful news. She took a deep, theatrical breath. We're pregnant. The line went silent for a moment, the satellite lag making it feel like an eternity. I stared at her image on my laptop screen. Pregnant. The word echoed in the small, dusty tent I shared with 3 other soldiers. My heart should have soared. I should have been ecstatic. We had talked about having kids, planned for it. But all I felt was a cold, sharp dread that settled deep in my gut. I did the math. A cold, brutal, and simple calculation. 7 months. I had been gone for 7 months. There had been no mid-tour leave. No surprise visits. 7 months is 210 days. I had not seen my wife, had not touched her, in 210 days. How far along are you? I managed to ask, my voice sounding distant and hollow even to my own ears. Almost 3 months, she chirped, oblivious to the silence on my end. The doctor says everything looks perfect. I wanted to wait until I was past the first trimester to tell you, to make sure everything was okay. Surprise. Surprise. That was one word for it. My mind raced, trying to find an alternative explanation, a flaw in my simple, damning arithmetic. There was none. The timeline was an impossibility. The child she was carrying was not mine. The foundation of my life, the one I had so carefully built on principles of loyalty and trust, had just been dynamited. On the screen, my wife was beaming, rubbing her belly. She was waiting for me to celebrate. I looked at her, at the woman I had promised my life to, and for the first time, I saw a complete stranger. My training kicked in. In a combat zone, emotion is a liability. Panic gets you killed. A calm, methodical assessment of the situation is the only way to survive. I compartmentalized the hurricane of pain and betrayal swirling inside me, locked it in a mental box, and focused on the mission. Wow, I said, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth. That's incredible news, honey. A baby. I can't believe it, and I couldn't. Just not in the way she thought. The mission had changed. It was no longer about surviving the tour and coming home to my wife. It was about surviving my wife and coming home to whatever was left of my life. After that call, I operated on 2 separate tracks. On the surface, I was the excited, expectant father. I endured a video call with her mother, Diane, who gushed about becoming a grandmother and made not-so-subtle hints about needing a bigger house now. A baby needs a proper nursery, Alex, not just a spare room filled with your military junk, she'd said. I agreed pleasantly. I asked Chloe about doctor's appointments. I suggested names. I played my part with an actor's discipline. Inside, however, I was a battlefield commander planning a complex operation. My first move was to contact my oldest friend, Ben Carter. Ben and I had grown up together, but while I went into the military, he went to law school. He was now a partner at a respected family law firm in my home state. He was sharp, pragmatic, and the most loyal person I knew. I sent him a carefully worded email from a secure computer on base, laying out the facts in a simple, unadorned list. 1. Deployed for 7 months, 0 leave. 2. Wife claims to be 3 months pregnant. 3. Timeline is impossible. 4. Need advice. Ben's reply came within hours. It was equally direct. Call me on this encrypted number ASAP. Do not use your personal phone the next day. I found a secure line and called him. I laid it all out again, the cold facts, the impossible dates. I kept my voice steady, repertorial. I did not speak of the betrayal, the pain, the image of her smiling face that was now burned into my mind. I just gave him the data. Ben was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Alex, I am so sorry, he said, and his genuine sympathy was the one thing that almost broke my composure. I'm your friend first, and that's what I'm saying now. As your lawyer, you have a decision to make. We can go scorched earth now, or we can play this quietly until you're back on U.S. soil. The second option gives us a massive strategic advantage. Explain, I said. Right now. She thinks you're a fool, Ben explained, his voice shifting into professional mode. She thinks you believe her. She's comfortable. She'll get careless. If you confront her now, from over there, she'll lawyer up, she'll start hiding assets. She'll build a narrative that you're an absent, angry soldier. But if you play along, we can gather everything we need. When you get home, we execute. It will be clean, fast, and decisive. What do you need me to do? I asked. The decision was already made. An emotional confrontation was a losing strategy. This was an intelligence-gathering operation. First, I need you to give me limited power of attorney, revoking hers. Use your sister, Sarah, as the new appointee. I'll draft the paperwork and send it to your commanding officer for you to sign and have notarized. This will allow us to act on your behalf without Chloe knowing. Second, open a new bank account at a completely different bank. Start rerouting your pay there immediately. Let the joint account balance dwindle. We need to cut off her funding, but slowly so she doesn't panic. Third, keep playing the happy husband. Get her to talk. Get her to spend money. Every dollar she spends on this new life of hers is another nail in her legal coffin. I followed his instructions to the letter. The paperwork for the new power of attorney was signed and sent back to Ben within a week. Sarah was confused at first, but she trusted me implicitly. I told her only that I was restructuring my finances and needed her help. I didn't want to burden her with the ugly details yet. I opened the new account and changed my direct deposit. Then I began my own quiet investigation. I logged into our joint bank account. The statement was a roadmap of her betrayal. There were charges for expensive dinners I knew she couldn't afford on her salary, jewelry store purchases, weekend trips to boutique hotels in a nearby city. And then I saw the name Julian Thorne. There were multiple payments to a Venmo account with that name, labeled with things like rent help and car payment. I did a quick social media search. Julian Thorne had a public profile. He was a personal trainer with a slick smile and photos of himself leaning against luxury cars that were clearly not his. His page was full of motivational quotes about living your best life. And there, in his pictures, was Chloe, laughing, leaning into him. In one photo, taken just a few weeks prior, his hand was resting possessively on her small baby bump. They were at a fancy outdoor restaurant, a bottle of champagne on the table. Champagne, while she was supposedly pregnant with my child. The rage I felt was a physical thing, a hot, metallic taste in the back of my throat, but I pushed it down. This was just evidence. Data points. I took screenshots of everything. I downloaded every bank statement for the past 7 months and sent them to Ben in an encrypted file. Ben hired a private investigator. A quiet, unassuming man named Marcus who used to be in military intelligence. He was the best. Marcus's reports started coming in a week later, and they were devastatingly thorough. Chloe was no longer living in our house. She had moved in with Julian Thorne in a sleek, overpriced apartment complex downtown. She only returned to my house once a week to pick up the mail. The PI got photos of them together, holding hands, kissing. He got a picture of the new car Julian was driving, a leased BMW, and ran the plates. The lease was in Chloe's name. My combat pay was funding her new life with her new man. The requests for more money started coming more frequently. First, it was for the nursery. I found the most perfect crib, Alex, but it's an import, she'd said on a call. It's expensive, but our baby deserves the best. I agreed and told her to use the joint account, knowing full well the funds were running low. A few days later, she called in a panic. The card was declined. Is everything okay with your pay? I'm looking into it, I said calmly. Must be a military mix-up. I'll sort it out. Just use the credit card for now. The credit card was in my name, with her as an authorized user. I let her rack up the debt. It was more evidence. Then came the demand for a new house. Her mother got on the phone this time. Alex, this little starter home of yours was fine for 2 people, but it's completely unsuitable for a child. Chloe needs more space, a better neighborhood. Julian, a friend of hers, found a wonderful new development just outside the city. She had said his name. A slip of the tongue. They weren't even being careful anymore. They thought I was an idiot, a walking ATM machine deployed a world away. too stupid and too distracted to see what was happening. That was their fatal miscalculation. They underestimated me. They saw a simple soldier. They didn't see the man who could disassemble and reassemble his rifle blindfolded, who could read a topographical map like a novel, who was trained to observe, adapt, and overcome. The final 2 months of my deployment were the longest of my life. I maintained the facade, listening to her lies, to her plans for a future that I would not be a part of. I felt like a ghost, haunting a life that was no longer mine. My platoon mates knew something was wrong. I was quieter, more withdrawn. But in the field, you don't pry. You just watch your brother's back. They gave me space, and for that, I was grateful. The day I stepped onto the transport plane to head home, I felt no joy. There was no anticipation of a happy reunion. This was just the final phase of the operation. Ben had everything ready. The divorce papers were drafted. A motion to freeze all our assets was ready to be filed. A petition for a formal DNA test was included. Everything was in place. When we landed on U.S. soil, I didn't call her. My phone was flooded with texts from her and her mother. "We're on our way to the base. Can't wait to see you. Wear your dress uniform for the pictures, honey." I ignored them. I went through the debriefing, turned in my gear, and met Ben in the parking lot of a diner a few miles from the base. He had a thick folder in his hands. "You ready for this?" he asked, his expression serious. I just nodded. I had been ready for 2 months. I sent Chloe a single text message. "Change of plans. Meet me at the Oakwood Diner on Highway 3. Come alone." Her reply was instant. "What? Why? We're almost at the base. Mom baked a cake. Come alone," I repeated. She arrived 20 minutes later. She was huge, her belly straining against a frilly maternity dress. Her face was a mixture of confusion and irritation. She slid into the booth opposite me, not even bothering to say hello. "Alex, what is this? This is ridiculous. Everyone is waiting for you at the house. This is supposed to be a celebration." I didn't say anything. I just reached into the folder Ben had given me and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a credit card statement. I slid it across the table. I had circled one of the charges in red ink. It was from a high-end men's clothing store. The charge was for over $2,000. "I was just wondering what you bought me," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. She glanced at the paper, her brow furrowing. "What are you talking about? I bought some things for the baby?" "No," I said, cutting her off. "That charge. From Vittorio's fine menswear. I don't remember needing a new suit. Especially not one that costs $2,000. Her eyes widened. A flicker of panic. "Oh, that was a mistake. A mix-up with the card." I pulled out a second piece of paper. It was a photograph. A clear, high-resolution picture taken by Marcus, the PI. It showed Julian Thorne, smiling, wearing a very distinctive, very expensive-looking suit. He was standing next to Chloe outside their apartment building. I slid the photo across the table. It landed next to the credit card statement. Her face went white. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, sickly pallor. She stared at the photograph, then up at me. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The arrogant, demanding woman from the phone calls was gone. In her place was a cornered animal. "Who is Julian Thorne?" I asked, though I already knew every detail about him, down to his shoe size and his favorite brand of protein powder. That's when the tears started. They were not the joyful, manipulative tears from the pregnancy announcement. These were real tears of fear and desperation. "Alex, I can explain," she stammered, reaching a hand across the table. I pulled my own hand back. "I don't think you can," I said calmly. "I've been gone for 9 months, Chloe. The baby is due in 2. You don't need to be a math genius to figure that out. The dam broke." She started sobbing, a torrent of excuses and blame pouring out of her. It was a mistake. She was lonely. Julian meant nothing. He took advantage of her. It was all her mother's fault for pushing her. She loved me. She only ever loved me. We could still be a family. We could raise the baby together. I listened to the entire performance without interrupting. When she finally wound down, exhausted by her own hysterics, I spoke again. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. "You will be served with divorce papers tomorrow morning," I said, standing up from the booth. "My lawyer is Ben Carter. Any further communication will go through him." "No, Alex, please," she wailed, grabbing for my arm. "Don't do this. Think about the baby." I said, looking her dead in the eye. "And I've come to the conclusion that it's not my problem." I walked out of the diner without looking back, leaving her there amidst the wreckage of the life she had torched with her own hands. The next few weeks were a blur of legal maneuvers. As predicted, Chloe and her mother went on the offensive. They hired a notoriously aggressive divorce lawyer, a shark named Arthur Vance, who immediately filed a counterpetition demanding everything. He claimed I was a mentally unstable soldier suffering from PTSD, that I was trying to abandon my pregnant wife out of spite. He demanded exclusive use of the house, temporary alimony, and for me to pay all his legal fees. Ben just laughed when he read their filing. "This is good," he said. "They're arrogant. They're overplaying their hand. Let them." We didn't respond with anger. We responded with facts. We filed the PI's full report, complete with dated and time-stamped photos of Chloe and Julian living together. We filed the bank and credit card statements, meticulously highlighting every fraudulent purchase she had made. We filed a motion for a court-mandated paternity test to be performed the moment the child was born. The response from their side was pure fury. Chloe called me, screaming, crying, violating the no-contact order. I didn't answer. She left dozens of voicemails, alternating between threats and pathetic pleas. Her mother sent me long, rambling emails accusing me of being a monster. I forwarded everything to Ben, who added it to our growing mountain of evidence. The external catalyst, as Ben called it, came about a month before the mediation was scheduled. Marcus, the PI who we had kept on retainer, gave us an update. Julian Thorne had been fired from his job. Apparently, the gym had received several complaints from female clients about his inappropriate behavior. A week later, he packed his bags and disappeared. He emptied the joint bank account he shared with Chloe, an account funded by my money, and was gone. The leased BMW was repossessed from the front of their apartment building. Chloe was evicted a week after that for non-payment of rent. Suddenly, she was homeless, pregnant, and broke, and she came crawling back. She showed up at my house, the one she had abandoned months ago. I saw her on my doorbell camera. She was crying, begging me to let her in to talk to her. "Alex, please, I have nowhere to go." Her voice was distorted and desperate through the small speaker. "He left me. He took everything. I was a fool. I know I was. Please just let me come home. We can work this out." I didn't answer the door. I just sat in my living room, watching her image on my phone, and felt a profound sense of emptiness. There was no satisfaction in her desperation. There was just a deep, weary sadness for the man I used to be, the man who would have believed her, who would have forgiven her. That man was gone. He had died in a dusty tent 7,000 miles away. I called the police and reported a trespasser. They escorted a hysterical, heavily pregnant Chloe off my property. Ben filed for an emergency restraining order the next morning, and it was granted. The day of the mediation arrived. It was a cold, gray morning. I wore a simple suit, not my uniform. I wanted to face her as a civilian, as the man she had betrayed, not the soldier she had used. I walked into Ben's law firm and was shown to a large conference room. She was already there, sitting on one side of a long, polished mahogany table. Her baby had been born a week prior, a little girl. Chloe looked exhausted and haggard. Next to her was her mother, Diane, looking severe and angry, her purse clutched in her lap like a weapon. Their lawyer, Arthur Vance, sat beside them, looking smug and overconfident. Ben and I took our seats opposite them. The mediator, a retired judge with a calm demeanor, sat at the head of the table. Vance started things off. He launched into a grand speech about my client's heroic service, but my deplorable and callous abandonment of his pregnant, vulnerable wife. He painted a picture of Chloe as a lonely, neglected woman who made a single mistake, and of me as a cruel, vengeful man using his resources to punish her. He concluded by presenting their demands: the house, 50% of my military pension, 5 years of rehabilitative alimony, and $20,000 in cash to cover her debts and moving expenses. Ben and I listened without expression. When Vance finished, the mediator turned to us. "Mr. Carter, your response?" Ben smiled thinly. He opened a large binder on the table in front of him. "Our response is simple," he began. "My client rejects every single one of their demands. Furthermore, we are making a counter-demand. We are demanding that Mr. Vance's client, Chloe, repay the $47,281 she fraudulently spent from my client's accounts during his deployment." Vance scoffed. "That's absurd. Those were marital funds, used for marital expenses. Is that so?" Ben said, his voice dangerously soft. He slid a stack of glossy photographs across the table. They were Marcus's best work. Chloe and Julian kissing. Chloe and Julian on a weekend trip. Julian driving the BMW that Chloe leased in her name. "Are you classifying a leased luxury vehicle for an affair partner as a marital expense, Mr. Vance? Or perhaps the $2,000 suit he's wearing? Or the rent on the apartment they shared while my client was serving his country overseas?" Vance's smug expression faltered. He shuffled through the photos, his face growing grim. Chloe refused to look at them, her eyes fixed on the table. Her mother, however, snatched one up and gasped. "Next," Ben continued, undeterred, "let's address the central issue of the child." He pulled out another document. "This is the court-ordered, legally admissible result of the DNA test performed 2 days ago." He slid it across the table. "It confirms, with a 99,999% certainty, that my client, Alex, is not the biological father." A choked sob escaped Chloe's lips. Her mother grabbed the paper, her eyes scanning it wildly. "This is a trick. It's fake." "I assure you it is not," Ben said calmly. "Which brings us to the issue of alimony. In this state, adultery is an absolute bar to receiving alimony. My client will not be paying a single dime." "The house, then?" Vance sputtered, trying to regain his footing. "The marital home. She is entitled to her share of the equity." This was the moment I had been waiting for. The final, devastating blow. Ben looked at me and I gave a slight nod. "Ah, the house," Ben said, leaning back in his chair. "There seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding here. The house at 124 Oak Street is not and has never been marital property." He produced another document, a copy of the deed and the bank records showing the source of the down payment. "The property was purchased by my client, in his name only, 6 months prior to the marriage, using funds from a personal inheritance. Under state law, it is his sole and separate property. His wife has no legal claim to it whatsoever." The silence in the room was absolute. Chloe looked up, her face a mask of utter confusion. She turned to her lawyer. "What is he talking about? It's our house." Vance looked at the documents, his face ashen. He knew. He knew he had been beaten, completely and utterly. "Is this true, Chloe?" he asked her in a harsh whisper. "Did you know he bought the house before you were married?" Her silence was his answer. It was Diane, her mother, who finally exploded. "You monster!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You planned this. You tricked her. You let her believe it was her home. You left her with nothing." "On the contrary," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was calm and steady. "I gave her everything. My trust, my loyalty, my name, my protection. I gave her a home. She was the one who chose to leave it. She was the one who left me with nothing. But the difference is I can rebuild. She can't." The collapse was total. Chloe devolved into hysterical sobs. Diane was screaming about lawsuits and injustice. Vance was trying to calm them down, his professional demeanor shattered. The mediator called a recess. Ben looked at me. "We're done here." I stood up. I straightened my tie. I looked across the table one last time at the woman who had been my wife, now just a weeping stranger. I felt a flicker of something. Not pity, but a distant, melancholy acknowledgement of a shared past that was now well and truly dead. Then I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. Ben followed me out, and we walked down the hallway, the sounds of her breakdown fading behind us until they were gone completely. That evening I went home. To my home. The silence was profound. For the first time in months it felt peaceful, not empty. I walked through the rooms, which still held faint traces of her. A perfume bottle on the dresser, a magazine on the coffee table. I systematically gathered every single thing she had ever owned. Every piece of clothing, every book, every knick-knack, and packed it all into cardboard boxes. I worked for hours, a methodical and cleansing purge. When I was finished, I took down the large, framed wedding photo that hung in the hallway. I looked at the smiling faces of the two strangers in the picture for a long moment. Then I slid the photo out of the frame and tore it in half. I replaced it with a picture of my platoon, taken just before we deployed. A dozen dusty, smiling, loyal faces. My brothers. My real family. I stacked the boxes of her belongings by the front door for her to collect. I opened a beer, went out to the deck that I had built with my own hands, and sat down. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was cool and clean. It was over. I had lost a wife, but I had reclaimed my life. My integrity was intact. My future was my own. And in the quiet dignity of that solitude, I found my peace. Loyalty, I realized, is not something you can demand or buy. It is a gift. And when it is betrayed, the only path forward is to honor yourself, trust in your own strength, and build a new foundation on the solid ground of truth.